Already. Shabbat shalom to everybody once again. Hello, hello, hello. Peace, peace, peace. Hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me on TikTok? I'm probably a little muffled. How you doing, Sister Nadine? Springtime, Big Brother Thomas, Zahara, and thank you for the love. Sister Latoya, JP, Brother TJ, Stacy, Y'all I Am, Danny, everybody. Gregorio. Alrighty. So, somebody's put something crazy on there, racism and all that. Hey, it is what it is. We deal with that. Alrighty, you can hear us. Okay, cool. All right. How you doing, Sister Nadine? Okay, cool. So today we're going to talk about the Alabama dock situation. We talked about it a little bit already. Most people have kind of even just thought about it only on the level of what happened with the chair, right? The chair has gotten, I don't know if I've seen a chair that's gotten more play in anything in life, let alone on social media. How you doing, MIT Steven? How you doing? I don't know how to pronounce it. Please forgive me. Is it Siat or Sayat? I don't know. Sayat Tassilier. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. How you doing? How you doing, Sunshine? But um, I want to talk about the Alabama dock situation. Led to talk about it. Been looking at it yesterday. Posted a little bit of it. Even had it come from somebody else's perspective, who's not part of our diaspora, but still was able to give a little bit of stuff. If you want to check that out on TikTok, I believe on Kofi_43, it's on there. And once again, I apologize if you're on TikTok. Really, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, we got a little weird situation we set up today. But that's what happens sometimes when you're on the road. You just got to figure out how to set things up. But we, I want to talk about this because it's a microcosm. So if you're not aware, I think everybody just about is. But how you doing, Sister Joy? How you doing, Brother Charles? How you doing, Sister Deja? How you doing, Ben? Thanks for being part of the community. As far as the Alabama dock situation, right? Um, the reason why it's important for us to go over and the reason why it's important for us to have conversation about is because it's a microcosm of things. And it's really, I want to talk about it from a community standpoint, right? Because there's something that a lot of people were asking. And like I said, I even have somebody else who, if you want to hear it from a Democrat perspective or a white country person's perspective or whatever, there's a person that I listen to a lot called Beau of the Fifth Column, Beau of the Fifth Column, the number 5, Beau of the Fifth Column. But I posted what he talked about when he talked about it because I thought it was important to hear from somebody's perspective, somebody who's been there. I have been through Montgomery, Alabama, but I can't say I've stayed there, and I do have some kin who are very familiar with that area, live around that area, but I'm not somebody who's from there. So I wanted to listen to somebody there, and I posted it. But I wanted to talk a little bit and go a little further even on what he talked about because it's about community, and that's a missing piece of the whole thing. We're talking about the chair, we're talking about I'm so glad that black people fought this and that or whatever, and if we're not careful, we'll just leave it there and miss something that happened with the community. See, because there was a cultural thing that happened, and I'm not just talking about as simple as white versus black. How you doing, Sister Shima? I'm not talking about as simple as white versus black. If you are going to only think of it like that, then you're missing something that really should be sparking our interest more than just the fact that some black people fought on behalf of a black man that was getting jumped. That's great. I think really anybody defending anybody getting jumped, and if they're of your family or community, especially if you're getting jumped or getting messed over without reason, then I believe anybody should jump in, should help, should make sure that they're doing something to help people that are in your diaspora. So that's not necessarily, I'm not saying that's wrong, right? Well, what I'm saying is that there's another part to it that's missing. Thank you, TJ. TJ from Canada. Got TJ down south in America and TJ from Canada on here. Praise y'all for both of you guys. How you doing, Sister Patricia? But I don't want to just focus in on, if we're not careful, we'll focus in on just black versus white. I want to talk about why did these people feel the need to jump in? And once again, if you just think about it only versus black versus white, but see, there's a community piece. See, those Alabama docks, they weren't, it's not as simple as the guys are just coming there, people just go there fishing, etc. You got to know the story of that area because once again, we have so much stuff that's taken away from us. Once again, we have such things that are outright not really shown and talked about, that if we're careful, right, we'll miss that there's a story behind what happened. How you doing? Cooks on a Budget. Thanks for being part of the community. There's a story that happened. There's a mindset that took place, right? You had that guy talking about whoever the country singer is who got in trouble. Well, I don't even know if he got in trouble, but they made a huge big deal about that. Now that's nobody's paying attention to that. The whole song "Don't Try It in a Small Town," and put up some stuff, and everybody said, "Oh, wait a minute, there's a story behind that. We can't just let that be posted. We can't just let that roll," right? And even some people who might even be on the side were like, "Yo, you a little too abrasive. We have to be careful with what you're putting out here," right? But there's also another part to it, right? There's also another piece that goes with that. So when we're listening, like you have to realize that in these Alabama docks, these docks are docks where trade happens, right? And I'm gonna be careful with my wording because obviously people are always looking to be able to take us down or whatever, right? And Shabbat Shalom to everybody coming in. How you doing? Peace. How you doing, Brother Anthony? Thanks for being on. How you doing, Sister Mignon? So, so there, you have to be careful. How you doing, Love It, Spencer? Thanks for being part of the community. You have to be careful because this has a story that goes back. This is where trade happened, right? Cotton went out and slaves came in. There was a trade that happened there. So this wasn't as simple as like, so people who live there, they are aware, whether they're what you want to call white or you want to call black or whatever, there's a trade that happened. And people were not going to allow somebody from their community to get beat up in that area, right? They weren't going to allow it. They were not going to have that because they know the story. So this was a place where tension is always high, and people of our diaspora who live there and who come through there are always aware of what needs to happen. Matter of fact, the people who would have been fighting on either side, whether you want to call it the white side or the black side, whatever, right? And I want you to focus a little past that, not only get caught up in that, that's part of the story, but that's not the whole story, right? You have to, I want you to realize that people that were there would have been black versus white, matter of fact, or would have known about this story as far as the slavery that happened, the trade, the shipping out of cotton, which was trades helped to produce, and then the shipping in of slaves to continue a lifestyle. And it's something that we don't talk about, that even when people say, hey, why is it that you guys say this? I never owned a slave, right? And I make my own money, right? You'll hear people say stuff like this. I never owned a slave. Why are you talking about chattel slavery? Get over it. It's the past. You hate white people. You're a reverse racist. And they say these things. They say, I have a great job, right? I work at such and such a corporation. I make money off of this and blah, blah. Or I have my own business and somebody pays my business. Here's the question for you, right? I want you to catch this. Here's the question for you. Who pays you? Because that's important. When people try to talk about reparations and all that, and I believe we need reparations. I've told you we should have inward reparations first, but I do believe that you should get reparations if you are a freedman, right? If you even know what that is, because that's how you're going to get reparations, true reparations, if you become a nation, right? Or if you're going to be a nation of Israel, if you're going to be a nation of Moors, right? A lot of people just want to get paperwork to get something, but they don't want to become a nation, right? Nations get reparations, not just anybody. How you doing, Melissa? How you doing, Darren? Thanks for being part of the community. But there's a story that goes behind it. See, because you can say, if you live in that area and you say, well, I just make money off of people that go fishing. How you doing, Sister Barbara? Well, who pays you? If you live in that area and you say, well, I have a corporation and we've made money off of the people in the area, well, then you have to ask the question, who pays you? If you say, I work in a prison over there, I'm a CO, I'm a correctional officer, then I have to ask the question, who pays you? If you're a prisoner, and by the 13th Amendment, if you're in prison, then you can be a slave, and that's why they can go ahead and have you pay your debt to society while only paying you pennies an hour, and then taking some of that in taxes and stuff, and then saying that you still owe Social Security when you get out. So even as the prisoner, who pays you? The person who pays all of you are the same people who you have to realize go back to the time where that dock was where cotton went out and slaves came in. Right? The Alabama dock is something serious because you got to figure out who pays you, right? And so the people that were there, that's why They're not going to just let anybody get jumped on those docks. Matter of fact, here's the deal. Some of it's already obviously probably been upkept and certain things happen. But believe it or not, those docks are pretty much the same as what they were when people came in or persons came in and cotton went out. Matter of fact, they wouldn't even call them persons back then. We call them persons today. Back then, they would have been property. Cotton property went out and human property or chattel property came in. How you doing, Fanny? All right. And so you have to ask yourself, if you are making any kind of money in the system, where did it come from? How you doing, Sister Crystal? You have to ask yourself a question. If that stuff came in, right, and that's how that city was made, right? That's what it was created upon. That's what caused it to be. That's what it was built upon. That no matter how you want to slice it, the whole system is based off of chattel slavery. And what happened, once again, I want to focus on the community aspect of it, because you have to realize that some people, even if they were still looked down upon in that community, everywhere in that area that you see, where no matter if it was a young brother jumping in the water and swimming, taking his shoes off and being ready to fight, whether it was the first guy who initially came down was just trying to break it up, whether it's somebody who used a chair, whether it's somebody who caused somebody to be so afraid, the 16-year-old, and by the way, the 16-year-old boy, he ain't got no reason even being in that. Nobody really did, because it shouldn't have been happen. But he jumps out of the water or whatever. Hey, he's a 16-year-old boy, and people who are making fun of that or whatever, even if he's on the wrong side, we had to get to a place to where we have some kind of empathy and we have some decorum. We're not going to be now. We had decorum in defending ourselves. Don't get it twisted. But I'm just saying, we're not going to be. If you came here, once again, I've said this before, I say it again. If you come here with the mindset that I'm just going to rail on somebody because of the color of their skin, and that's all there is to it, and I say hate everybody, right? That's not what I'm here to do. But I am here to tell a real story. I am here to tell our story, not his story, our story. I'm here to talk about some things that you need to recognize as community. See, the reason why that community fought in a way that we don't see people fight is because that community said, we have certain things that we will not allow here. We have certain laws and principles and statutes within our own community that do not allow us to see somebody who's just simply doing their job take a beat down. How you doing, Sister Juanetta? Right? Yeah, enough is what they were saying. Yeah, but on top of that, it's not even, see, watch this. See, we think that this is just something that happened to the doc. They don't allow that, period. If they see somebody getting messed over like that, they come out. Because see, there's another situation. I don't know if you guys have seen that one. I don't even know. I was trying to find more information about that one. I don't even know all the details, but there's another situation that happened in another place. And there's a young boy who simply going to take the trash out. And he gets arrested by the police officers because he's taking the trash out. And his father walks out to try and help his son. He can't help his son because he knows, I'm gonna have to go be the one to go get my son from the police. So rather than fight the police, he has to stand there. And there's a bunch of us who are recording it, but nobody came out to help. Or even if we didn't help and put our lives in line because people were afraid the police might do this or that or whatever, nobody came out to at least stand around to put some pressure on them, right? Because in our mind, we as a community say, well, that's just what happens. It's messed up. We'll record it. We'll talk about it. But we don't have something that stands up in us that says that this is something we don't allow because of our community. So earlier that day, a group of women had gone to the dock, dropped rose petals in the water to honor our ancestors. Yeah, right. In that dock, there's a story. See, if you weren't aware, there's even people where that dock is, there's markers all over the place. If you do some research that tell you, like if you go to Central Park, you'll discover that was once Seneca Village, right? Something owned by our people, and the water right next to uh, uh, Central Park. I can't remember the river right now, forgive me, or the water that they call it, but that used to be land, and our people used to have land there. You'll see markers there to indicate what used to be there, right? Before there's there. So you'll see at the dock, you'll see slavery pens there, sure, you'll see that. And also what probably was happening is that some of the people who saw what was going on were not that far, because maybe a block away, you'll see a trail there that you walk through, which would be the trail that slaves would be coming up and down as they came off the dock. So somebody who's already in the mindset of, man, I'm coming there for what happened to my ancestors. I'm coming there to learn. I'm coming there to uphold things about community. And then I look out and I see somebody in my community being attacked. Or even if I don't know what that is, I see a ruckus and I come towards there. Oh, wow, my people are being attacked. I'm going to help. There's a community aspect that's missing to it. And all the story you're hearing, you're don't get caught up on just the chair, right? Now everybody's WWE videos with the chair. Now everybody's out here making videos where they take a chair. Now everybody's out here making videos where they put their face on the chair, superimpose it, and are there to make you laugh. And look, I get it. In a way, it's celebration, but don't get caught up just in the chair. I want you to see that there was community that stood up and said, hey, we know our story enough. How you doing, Sister Beverly? We know our story enough. We know what happened enough. We know enough about what they used to do to us, to where if it's going to happen anywhere, it's not going to happen here, because for us this is hallowed ground. This is why you have to realize what you're in, right? The United States Corporation, right, and all these states and all these places that you go, from Hiawassee um, to um, uh, to Akakik to Sioux Nation, to California, Khalifa, where the Khalifa people were. You got to recognize that this is your people and your place, and you got to know what happened here, so that you don't think of this as, oh, okay, we're just going through with American citizens, when Americans used to be considered to be copper colored people, indigenous to the Americas. And so when people start to do you wrong, you start to realize that they're doing us wrong, and they're doing stuff wrong on where Yah had placed us and allowed us to be. And he allowed us to be here, which is why we never even thought our native people, right? We never even thought, and even our African side, if you wanted to deal with native, because that's all we ever talk about is indigenous to the Americas or African, right? As if there's nobody else. But nevertheless, if that's what we're dealing in, then we have to also realize that um, there's no place that we even thought of as owning land, right? That's why we thought it was crazy to own land. We would sign treaties like, these people are foolish. They want to own the land. Okay, nobody can own land, but you're dealing with a different culture. And that's something that we got messed over before, in where we didn't fight for certain things. How you doing, MIT Jelani? We didn't fight for certain peace. We didn't fight for certain love. We didn't fight for certain values. And now here we are talking about, as we were talking about with Minister Tamara last night, oh, well, you know, we black men this and black women this, and we don't do this and we don't do that. But that's not our culture. But we are not fighting to reserve something that is ours, to preserve even something that is ours, to protect something that is ours, right? To detect for stuff that is not ours. This is what happens on the Alabama dock. That's what happened. That's what went down, is that there was a community aspect. So everybody was talking about why, and you heard a lot of people, this is the first time, or this is so rare do I ever see that something like this happens, where, we're going to stand up for ourselves. People come together as a community. It's not about this and that or whatever. It's not about having to hear this. But the reason why is because we don't even have that as a mindset. The people there have a community. Yes, unity, unmach, assembly. Yes, they have a community. Familia. Whether you're talking in Espanol or really before that, Kiswahili, familia. Like they are a family unit there. They know each other there. They know what happened there. Those people come to the docks often. And something that we don't even talk about, a lot of those people were even his coworkers, which means that not only the person there was trying to do what they do and was like, kind of like, all right, F this job, I guess, and I'm getting ready to fight or whatever. He puts his hands up to square up. But also that means that other people that were there were like, hey, you are more important than this job too. Our community gets to be put at a certain level. Many times we're not willing to say stuff or do things because we're tied to jobs, or we're tied to certain situations, or we're afraid what the landlord might say, or we're afraid of what people would say about us on social media, or maybe our family members will not give us the back up that we need and stuff like that. But you have to realize that there's a community aspect. You said there's a part awakened in us. Yeah, well, and even with that, and I agree with you, Sister Monica, and praise y'all that things are starting to be presented and people are starting to wake up. Here's the deal, though: wake up, and now we got to do something as community. I haven't been successful, but first thing I try to do was to reach out and say, hey, what can we do to help anybody if they need help as far as what they should do legally, right? Because that's it's not just enough that you fought, but now you got to be protected. We were talking about this last night, right? Like before we can talk about the fact that women should be protected in our community should be protected. If you're used to protecting each other, then you'll protect your wife. You said the tradition leaves a memory too. Sure. So we got to uphold certain traditions, right? Like even in that. So I would agree with you. Even going further, what are the traditions we hold up? See, watch this. Where you come from, if somebody messes with somebody in your community goes out. I'm sorry, spiritual prospect, if I didn't say hello, how you doing? Now, if somebody messes with somebody in your community is upset, maybe. I don't know how to pronounce the name. Is it Leholman? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. But thanks for being part of the community. See, there's certain things that we have to have honest dialogue about, honest conversation about. It's time for us to build community. The reason why those people jumped in is because you're not going to do that on those docks because we believe those docks to be sacred. We believe those docks, the memory of those people to be sacred, that is set apart. And even if the government won't set it apart, we'll set it apart. Right? Because the government, they put some markers and stuff there, but they didn't even say, okay, you know what? This is ground where we probably shouldn't just be commercializing and making money off of it. But see, if that's the deal, at some point, if the government admits it there, guess what they have to do? They have to start admitting that everywhere. Right? I don't know if you ever thought about that, but the government, if they admit that about that place, they got to admit it everywhere because everywhere in the what you consider the United States of America, Canada, Mexico, Guatemala, go down to Brazil, Ecuador, uh, Paraguay, Argentina, Chile, everywhere that you want to go and talk about, right? Jamaica, uh, Cuba, Puerto Rico, right? Wherever you would like to go, at some point you have to admit that all of that, before it was turned into what it was turned into, that was not, those places were things that we were charged over because they belong to the Most High. How you doing, Minister Nice? And so you're dealing with a duality. You're dealing with cognitive dissonance. You're dealing with um, double-binded situations where people want you to agree with something something in a culture that should never have inhabited this place, and at the same time want you to be lower. What do I mean by that? The people who are in charge here only have charge because you know, we can even say somewhat foolishly, we can say somewhat ignorantly, but what happened was we allowed somebody's culture to be implemented here more than our own. We always have this thing that says, well, how do you fight people who have guns, and how do you fight people who do this, and how do you fight people who have a non-belief, and how do you do, but see, we had to make treaties with people and never checked them to the level of saying your culture might outdo, uphold, mess up everything that we have this set up, right? We never we never thought about that. We never realized, we never thought about, right? I won't say never, but we didn't think about enough that we are making treaties with things that are outside of our culture. And once that happened, things began to change drastically. Because see, when you make a treaty with something and somebody, you got to be careful. Treaties don't mean, like, watch this, allies. And I get what people mean when they say they're your allies in certain fights that are going on today. But be careful. How you doing, Darius? Be careful with an ally. We've spoken on this before. I want to speak on it again. Be careful when you're dealing with an ally, because an ally, even if, first of all, hopefully the ally keeps up their end of the agreement. But let's just say the ally is 100% in on what they've agreed on, If somebody's your ally, it has no bearing on them actually helping you out and helping your community out. But somebody says, "Oh, what do you mean by that?" An ally signs a treaty. They sign a contract. The contract says for the ally that we are not the same people. However, maybe we have the same enemy or we have the same interests. And so to make sure that both of us are protected, we will protect you, you will protect us up to a certain point. Did you catch that? People miss that. Up to a certain point. Allies are not supposed to help you no matter what. Allies are supposed to help you up to a certain point. In the contract, I could even say period, because there's periods in there. The period is an indicator as far as how far that sentence goes. So the sentence in the contract is drafted specifically to go up to a certain period, a certain point, literally, in the contract, right? That's how interpretation goes. If somebody interprets the contract, they're going to look even for the punctuation marks, because the punctuation marks are going to show us about where the person's allegiance or where the person's whatever is. Allies are not there to help you no matter what. How you doing, Brother Alton? So be careful when you keep upholding allies, because allies will uphold you too, but they'll only uphold you to a certain point. So anybody who is your ally, you must recognize the point they'll go to and start realizing that therefore they are not a confidant. They are not for you, but they might be a constituent. They're for what you're for. Somebody who's for what you're for is not for you. And so even though it might seem like it's similar, you'll walk together, but eventually the one who's a confidant, they go further than the ally who has to stop and be a constituent. The comrade is not for you. The comrade is not for what you are for, but the comrade is what is against what you are against. So be careful even about comrades. See, comrades are allies too, but comrades just say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The constituent says, hey, I'll be an ally as long as you get me to a certain point. Constituency is like why you have Democrats and Republicans. You have a Democrat constituency, you have a Republican constituency. A Republican will roll with you up to a certain point, but there's some Republicans that said, up, okay, Donald Trump, you doing too much, blah, blah, this and that. Okay, I'm done with you. And they'll let him hang. That's not your confidant. That's not your boy, right? Trump thought that was your boy, but Trump comprehends that. But Trump also knows that he has constituency that will go with him further. Those are people that got that confidant energy. They're not just a constituency. They don't care about the Republican Party. They care about Trump. That's a confidant. And I'm not even trying to speak negatively at this moment in time. I'm trying to tell you that's how it works. Trump has confidants who don't care about being a Republican. They ride with him. Doesn't matter how guilty he is, they ride with him. Doesn't matter how many times that they heard him say, that he loves God, and at the same time talks about grabbing by the P word, right? They roll with him. They are confidants. They are ride or die. It doesn't matter. They'll say it's upsetting that they're hearing that Giuliani and all these other people are coming out and admitting that they did this and they did that and they lied about this, but they still say, but Trump's First Amendment rights, we fight for. Why? Because they ride or die. They're going to find a way because they are confidants. They have decided to become a community based off of a specific thing that Trump represents. How you doing, Messi? Amen. This is Mignon, right? Like they have decided no matter what, they're going to ride or die. That's a confidant. Right? They're allies to the Republican Party, but only up to a certain point. And certain Republicans are allies with them because, hey, it helps them. They help them to get votes and all this stuff. And when they realize now it's kind of going to tear apart their ability to get votes, now all of a sudden, guess what? They started leaving. Why? Because they are what? They are allies. They are constituents. They are not confidants. And a lot of people, again, it's political. And guess what? A lot of people are what? A lot of people are having political relationships, and you don't think about them as such. You're getting involved with people, with your businesses and your friendships and your marriages, even with your children and parents, if you're not careful, where you guys are developing relationships specifically to make sure that you are more allies. You are more allies, right, than you are actual community. You're family, right? You have political values that are similar, but you don't have any family. This is what happened on the docks, is that once again, people who knew our story knew that that was a place where cotton went out and human capital came in, that they were the human capital, that there were still people there that they had to work for, and they were simply doing what other people they work for in the corporations were telling them to do. And these people said, you know what, we look down upon you because we know where we come from, boy. You don't get to tell me that even though I'm not allowed to park a boat here because that's reserved for other boats that are bigger, you don't get to tell me, because if anybody's going to tell me, it's going to be somebody who I consider to be somebody that's a human being. And that person finally said enough is enough. And when other people saw they were going to beat him down on those same docks, as if he was nothing, as if he was chattel, just like they used to beat us down before, somebody said, no, we'll stand with you. That's what you find heroic, is the family dynamic. That's what you find heroic, is they stood up for something they believed in. That's what you find heroic, is they threw hands, not just because it was time, just because we need to throw hands. They threw hands with a cause. That's what you find heroic, is that they are willing to serve prison time. Some of them, Mike, the person who swung the chair, probably gonna have to do some time, but they were willing to serve time because of the love that they had. And anybody who's willing to serve time because of love for somebody, that is somebody that's deep, right? No greater love is a man than this. The reason they did it, right? No man, no greater love has a man than this. This is what the Messiah said. No greater love has a man than this, that he would give his life for his friend. How you doing, Sister Vivian? There's no greater level of love, of action. That's what love is. It's an action. No greater action has a man than this, that he would lay down his life for his friend. Because a friend sometimes will stick closer even than a brother. That's what you admire. You know that somebody hitting somebody with a chair, you know that that could get somebody in some serious trouble, especially in our diaspora. But somebody said, whatever it takes. And even the person that did it, when they did it, if you look at them, as soon as they did it, they were like, yep, they kind of even put their hands behind their back, like, yep, I know I'm going, right? They said, I might have gone a little too far, but I'd rather go too far protecting my brother than make sure that I saw that brother get messed up. You're dealing in Alabama too. You're dealing in a I don't know, is Alabama open carry state? Matter of fact, let me not just say that, without, let me look that up. Is Alabama an open carry state? Okay, open carry with a permit. So people can have guns all over the place, right? 19 years old, 19-year-olds can carry there. These people said, even in the midst of that, we do what we got to do. Well, you're saying no, according to looking up, according to March, as far as March 10th, 2022, according to the governor's decree, Alabama allows open carry without a permit, or without a permit, excuse me. Alabama allows open carry without a permit. Any person who is at least 19 years old and legally entitled to possess a firearm can carry in open carry. Some areas are off limits, including schools and courthouses, but it's still open carry, right? Okay, so even in that, you saw brothers that said, we will not allow in that place where we know that that was a place that bordered in. And by the way, that's Alabama. People keep acting like, stuff didn't happen there, or stuff only happened on this part of blah blah. That's Alabama. We're getting further inland, aren't we, than what they try to tell you. Not as far as where chattel slavery existed, but I'm talking about where slave trade existed, where they brought slaves in. Cotton left out of that dock and slaves came in. You said if they have a right to have a gun, you have a right to have a chair. I mean, hey, defending yourself. And hopefully, if they know how to do it, I think he should be able to be fine in saying, hey, I was at the moment I had to defend myself. You said it's being just and being righteous in the same in the Bible. Righteousness means right lawful standing. See, so even if we're talking about that conversation, see, that's a cultural conversation again. Because when somebody says just, it means according to what culture? Like, for example, sex is marriage, marriage is sex. According to state constitutions, the United States Constitution, according to state law, if you walk down the aisle with somebody and you guys never have sex for 3 months, right? They will annul your marriage. If you go back before the judge, they'll say your marriage never existed, never counted. Why? You said you're just saying in the Bible. Well, once again, I'm going to set that up for you, because if I just say yes or no, and you don't know the culture behind it, a lot of people just say, well, what does the Bible say? But we don't know the culture of the people that lived it, right? So concerning righteousness and just, righteousness in the Bible means right lawful standing, just like righteousness period means right lawful standing. So if you're justified, you have to be justified by right lawful standing, right? The just shall live by faith. The word live there is interchangeable with the word walk there, whether you're talking about the Hebrew or the Greek. So the just shall walk by faith. There's an action. There are laws in place that you should walk within, because laws don't give rights, laws protect rights. See, so there has to be a communal aspect. I could talk about it, but if you don't comprehend what they're saying when they say righteousness, right? It's like if somebody talks about salvation. If you're not careful, you'll think that everybody who's saved has salvation. But the Bible doesn't even declare that, right? Romans chapter 10, verse 9 and 10. Romans 10:9 says that you have to confess. The word confess there means to have the same logic. Homologio means same logic. So if you don't have the logic of the ones who walked in the law, right, who is Yahshua himself, or who people still call Jesus, depending on your mindset and what culture you want to represent, right? You could talk about being saved and not realize that you have to have the same logic of Christ. And if Christ says in Matthew chapter 5, verses 10 through 12, this is all Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 10 through 12, Matthew 5, 17 through 20, and Matthew 7, 12, that you have to carry the law and the prophets in order to be justified, right? Because you're not just, or not just, but to, or to be just, rather. Then if that's the case, then you have to continue. Now he covers us with the blood because we cannot do all that within ourselves because we fall short. But even the blood helps to cover the gaps, not to cover everything you're doing. See, the sin is to miss the mark. If I'm aiming at the target and I pull back, pull an arrow out of my quiver and I pull back and I release and I miss the mark, that's a sin, right? But it's a sin because I missed the mark. I was aiming at a target. But see, if I pull an arrow out of the quiver, the target's over here, but I pull arrow out of the quiver and I release, I'll still miss the mark because the mark is over here, but that's not sin, right? That's even worse than sin. That's when we start getting the stuff that's just straight blasphemous, because you're not even close. You're not even trying to aim at the target, right? So we have to be careful when we talk about those things. We have to be mindful when we talk about we're talking about cultural relevance, right? We don't like to talk about things from a cultural perspective, but you cannot have proper interpretation, even considering law, which the Bible is. So you cannot have proper interpretation of something if you're not even dealing with those things. You said, can I talk about Psalm 87? I don't know what part Psalm 87 is quite a bit. I mean, Psalm 87, his foundation is in the holy mountain. So his foundation is in the holy mountains. Yep, for sure. It's lifted up. It's holy, right? We could talk about Zion or other mountains that are considered to be holy, but holy mountains, Yahweh or the Lord. Yahweh loveth the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob. So the gates of Zion, more than all. So there's a specific place. And if you know about gates, enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. The word thanksgiving there, you deal with Middle English. So the word thanksgiving means fasting. So there are certain things you have to fast from or withhold from before you can even come into the gates. So he loves a place of Zion where he was at a high place in the high mountains. Glorious things are spoken of thee, O city of Elacham. Salah. That means great things are spoken of, people who uphold that culture and who are in that city, inhabiting that place. Salah means pause and think about that. Verse 4, I will make mention of Rahab or Rahab and Babylon to them that know me. Behold, Philistia and Tyre and with Ethiopia, this man was born there. In other words, and so we're talking about us even as Israel. So make mention of Rahab. Why will I make mention of Rahab? I'll make mention of Rahab in our story, right? This is our story. Once again, we're talking about community. In our story, Rahab is important because Rahab was not necessarily an Israelite. She was even a prostitute, yet she knew about our ways and traditions and stuff. And just like the Bible says that we should take care of the foreigner if they're willing to serve the Most High, right? Even when the temple was built, Solomon said that, even if they're willing to serve the Most High. So we would make sure that we do what? We would make sure that we would take on these people who were willing to help us and to help us to be able to get into where we got into, right? So I will make mention of Rahab and Babylon. Babylon is where we were in captivity and we had to stay away from it. Like Belteshazzar was really Daniel, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were really Ananiah, Hananiah, Azariah. We had to keep our culture, right? You're talking about the Philistines, the Tyre, you're talking about people we fought against or whatever, but had to keep the culture. And if we're not careful, just like the Philistines can get into a situation and allow you to start pining for certain things and even giving opining when it comes through the prism of somebody else's culture, just like Samson did when he lost his locks and lost his strength. We have to make sure that we keep our strength, right? You got Ethiopia. Ethiopia really would have been considered to be what? Cush would have been considered to be even what? The story of where you have Queen Sheba, who marries even into King Solomon, right? Cushites even married into the Midianite or the Cushite woman, right? Zipporah even married into Moses, which means that you can't talk about being a Levite without talking about being Cush. That's why when I go back to Africa, if I go to Ethiopia, if I go to Cush, there are certain places that they'll allow me to come into because I come in and they recognize me as Judah, as Yehovah. That's our people. That's our culture. Verse 5 of Psalm 87 says what? And of Zion it shall be said, this and that man was born in her, right? Of Zion it shall say that I was born in her. And the highest himself shall establish her, shall establish Israel, the woman that's talked about in Genesis chapter 3, the woman that's talked about as the wife of the Most High in Jeremiah 3:15, the woman that, or sorry, Jeremiah chapter 3, the woman that's talked about specifically in Revelation chapter 12, right? He shall establish us. Verse 6, Yahweh shall count. He shall count when he writeth up the people. This man was born there. Because it doesn't matter in law. It doesn't matter where you were born. It matters who you were born from. It doesn't matter where you're from. It matters who you were from. That's why a lot of people are U.S. citizens and don't know what it is to be a non-citizen national. That's why a lot of you are public citizens and don't know what it is to be privately taken care of. You're not nation building, making sure you establish Israel. You're doing everything for a false nation because the United States, by law, 28 U.S.C. 300215A, is not a country, but it's a corporation. Subsection B says that it is not a country, but it is a board. That's why you have a president, vice president, treasurers, secretaries, cabinet members, Congress members who are in different boards, whatever, right? And then 28 USC 300215 subsection C tells you specifically that it is not just only a corporation, it's not only a board, but it's publicly traded. And who is the capital? You are, because you're considered to be a slave, not a real person. That's why you are a straw man. You are a representative. Straw man in law has to be considered to be property. So we're coming out of being property and going back to being children of the Most High, sons and daughters at Zion. Bat at Zion. Verse 7, as well as the singers, as the players on instruments shall be there. All my springs are in thee. So that's talking about we shall worship. We shall have our songs. Look at in Revelation, after you read Revelation 12 and 13, you got to keep going. Chapter 14, chapter 15, where there's even specific songs and odes that will only be specific to us and those who are grafted into us. Even when you go into heaven, it says that you're going to have to pass through on the pearly gates. You're going to have to pass through Israelite branches, or what you might call tribes. It's talking about your community. See, this Alabama thing is talking about a community. The Alabama dot is when a community came together and said, there's certain things that we hold in high regard that others don't hold, and we are willing to fight for them no matter what. Even when you look at, by the way, when you go through the pearly gates, the 12 gates that are going to be in Yerushalayim, you also look on the bottom, the foundation. It says that the names of the 12 apostles are going to be on them. That's how you have the 12 and the 12. You have the 24 elders in Revelation chapter 4. See, that's why I say somebody can ask me a question about the word of Yah. They can ask me a question about the Bible. They can ask me a question about something. But if I don't give you culture behind it, you might not know what I'm talking about. In January 6th, yeah, January 6th was something where people, were trying to uphold stuff and there's a culture of trying to take over something, for sure. And how you doing, Sister Lori? How you doing, Carol? So the Alabama docs are speaking to a community. And as much as you might not want to hear this, and as much as they might try to say I'm some kind of rabble rouser, I'm some kind of reverse racist, I'm some kind of black nationalist, which I don't care if they call me that or not, to be honest with you. But whatever you want to try and label me as long as you're not trying to do so in the court of law, because obviously I don't identify with that as far as Western ideology, right? But you're dealing with one community against another. You're dealing with one culture against another. You said you have a book that says Jesus was a drag queen. I would assume, is that true? I would say that that's probably not true. And please, moderators, don't get mad at the person if it's an actual genuine question. We'll see if GT is being genuine on that, because that's a heck of a place to go. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But the moderators, they run stuff up in here, so I got to bow down to them ultimately. But I'm asking them, right? But at the end of the day, you have to show me what is that book based off of, and where did they get that from? Just because you got a book, books don't mean nothing. I could write in a book that the sky is polka dot. What does that mean? Where did I get it from? Now I can tell you some books, like a book written by Flavius Josephus, that tells you about why you know about your Roman um emperors and all that, and you know about Roman history, and you know about Roman theology and all that, and what the Romans did and didn't do. He's the reason why. You can read in his book what Yahashua looked like, what his culture was, what the law was, and why even people freaked out on that night. You can look at a book by Oluwada Equiano, who was a former slave who forgot who he was as a child because he had repressed memories. And then all of a sudden, when he bought his freedom, and then years after that, read the Bible, and then he had his childhood come back to him, he said, "Oh, I was an Israelite." We could talk about that book. We could talk about books that talk about Pontius Pilate, and how Pontius Pilate, or Pontius Pilate, was somebody who was supposed to, who's somebody who really existed in history, got in trouble for two things, which is, excuse me, which is ultimately why he lost his position. First time he got in trouble was because Yahashua um, was somebody who, the situation that happened with the Messiah, right, that night on Passover, Pasach. The second time was because there were people that um, were coming against Roman rule, and so he got kicked out. Right. We can talk about many different books and many different historical documents that are there. Thanksgiving, as far as if you see it in the Bible, Thanksgiving in Middle English means to fast. Thanksgiving was not known as a gluttonous celebration of natives and people who came over on the Mayflower, coming together harmoniously. That wasn't until Abraham Lincoln forced that upon you and called it Thanksgiving during his presidency. So Thanksgiving in Middle English meant to fast. So when you see in the Bible, because the Bible, when it's written, it was written in Middle English, right? So when you see in the Bible Thanksgiving, that's different than give thanks. Give thanks means give thanks. Thanksgiving actually means to fast. People in Europe, they knew, and some of them still know, that if they're going to have a time of Thanksgiving, they would fast. You would turn down your plate. You said if it's celebrated in the way it is, no shock if they're opposites. Yeah. So Thanksgiving, but that's what I was saying. We're talking about culture. See, the reason why those people on the docks did what they did is because they have a culture that's similar. They don't deny what happened, right? And they will fight to make sure it doesn't happen again because they don't not deny what happens. The reason why people won't fight for you, reason why we won't fight for ourselves, is because you watch this. Watch this. How can you fight for what you don't think is important? Some people just fight for whatever reason, but for real, the average person walking around is not going to fight for what they don't value. They're not going to fight against something that comes against their values. How do you fight for what you don't value? This is what happened on the docks. We value life. We value our story. We value what Yah's doing. We value what's going on. And you're not going to just go ahead and take us out the way that you used to on those same docks. How do you value a husband if you don't value him as important? How do you fight for a husband? How do you fight for a proper definition of a husband? Everybody talks about a husband and this and that, but you don't fight to protect husbands. What is a husband? According to our culture, why would you fight for him? And therefore, why would you fight against anybody who's not? See, I talk about husbands and wives quite often. Why? Because in my culture, a husband is specifically something. So I make it a point to say it's within my culture. If I go into somebody else's culture, if I go into somebody else's country, if I go into somebody else's house and they're doing something different with husbands, that's what they do. But in our community, this is what a husband is. So I have to say this is what a husband is. And if I see a man who's not being a husband, I will call him out. If I see a woman who would not respect her husband, I will call her out because there's value in a husband. How do you fight for a wife if you don't value a wife? Like we were talking about this last night, Minister Tamara, and I believe it was a question that came from, I don't know if it was Sister Sage. I think it was Sister Iska, but I could be wrong. If it was somebody else, I apologize. I think it might have been Sister Iska who last night asked the question, where they were saying, well, the Bible never says all this stuff about a woman has to be cooking and cleaning and doing all this and doing this and blah, blah. Like, where did we get that from? Right. And how do we get that to be? And I said, well, in all honesty, one of the things that you got to think about is you got to have a conversation within your community and culture. In our community and culture, it never says that women have to be the ones to cook. You got to ask yourself where you got that from. It never says in your Bible, women have to be the only ones to cook. You won't find it. So you have to ask yourself, where did that come from? Now look at the slave master and how he treated his wife who was so upset about things that they had to put into place the Casual Killing Act to protect her when she was offing these babies. And how you doing, Sister Latoya, if I didn't say so earlier, right? So it never said in the Bible. Matter of fact, look in your Bible. When Isaac is on his deathbed, he was asking for Esau because Esau could throw it down in the kitchen, right? He had his rights to his last meal. He was getting ready to go, and he wanted his last meal. He didn't ask for Rebecca to put a little something, something together. Right, and Abraham was the one for the three visitors. Some of you even consider, theologically speaking, it's an argument, but some of you even consider when it comes to um, uh, the three people that came, that they represent the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Matter of fact, go back to Esau real quick. Esau didn't make the venison, right? The venison, it was Jacob who made the venison, which means that Jacob knew how to cook like Esau. Now, there are women who cook in the Bible, of course. I'm not saying only men should cook. I'm just saying we have this mindset. You got to ask yourself, when did you start getting to this thing that women are the only one that's supposed to cook? They're the only one supposed to be cleaner. Look up a fuller. The Bible declares, it talks about a fuller and a fuller's soap and how we got to be washed and cleansed with a fuller's soap. If you don't know what a fuller is, you'll miss it. See, a fuller, I think it's Ezekiel 34 is what the context I'm talking about. I could be wrong. But a fuller is a word described as somebody who basically was somebody who did laundry. They were a laundryman. And they would come through the town and they would do clothes. They would have to take the dirty clothes outside of the city, and they would even take the sheep that were shorn, they would take their wool outside the city to make sure it was clean enough that they could use it. Those were men and women, right? So you had to ask yourself, when did we turn into a people who are now saying that women have to be barefoot, buck naked, in the kitchen, pregnant? Yes, Rebecca cooked for Jacob. Like I said, there are women who are accounted for cooking for women, or for men, right? We made it a point to say that, right? So they are both. So we have to get this thing to, where do we say that only women can cook? Where did we get this thing to where we say that to be a man means that you can't cook? Where did we get this thing to where women don't go into battle? Because they didn't go into battle unless Deborah went into battle. Read the book of Judges. I'm not saying they had to have a woman there every time. I'm saying that there are different accounts of it. We got to be holy or holistic. We only like to pick certain parts, right? It's like, I put a video out, and it's not against. I said in the video, it's not against our brother who put the video out, who duetted it. I was talking against the person, and not even against the person who originally put it. I wanted to talk against the spirit. It's like when you have people talk about a tithe, and now the newest one is that you hear tithes were only food. But in the video, when the brother's talking, he's only using one chapter, right? I can't even remember what it is. It's Deuteronomy 14:22, 15:22, something like that. He'll use one chapter, one verse. But why don't you go back to, I think it's Genesis 14:22, and you can go back to Genesis really 14:21, where Father Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek, and it said he gave a tithe of all that he had, a tenth of everything, right? But if you take it out of interpretation, what happens is you have a lot of people who just don't want to give any tribute to anybody, don't want to set aside anything for the community, because that's what a tithe is supposed to be for. And so, since we don't want to give anything, even though you'll give to Budweiser and you'll give to McDonald's and you'll give to, you won't grow your own food because you keep talking about tithe as food, but you won't grow food so you can be in accordance with making sure your community has food. You won't do that. But you keep saying that a tithe is only food. But here it is. You won't grow any food, but you'll make sure that you keep giving a tenth of all your stuff to somebody else, but you have nothing for your community. See how community is important, how culture is important? Amen, Sister Donnie. You said psychology of America spreads around the world like wildfire. Well, yeah. Before that, it was the psychology of the West, and before that, it was the psychology of Canaanites, and before that, and in between there, you can talk about the psychology of Babylon and the psychology. I mean, so it's a spirit that goes on and it permeates, and there's certain cultures who have more of that spirit. We get caught up in everybody else's culture. This is what it says, by the way, even before you talk about being saved. A lot of you go to Romans 10:9. You got to start with Romans 10:1. Romans 10:1 is Paul's prayer that Israel would still be saved. Romans 10:2, we have a zeal for Elohim, but it's not according to knowledge, being intimate with who Elohim is and the culture. Therefore, Romans 10:3, we got into everybody else's stuff and not our own. So how can you confess something at Romans 10:9? Because confession means to have the same logic. How can you have the same logic, but you don't even carry the same culture? Do you hear what I'm saying? How do you carry the same logic and you don't carry the same culture? Familia in España is not familia for those who speak Kiswahili. Same word, because those who speak Kiswahili taught those before Spain was a country, taught them about familia. But how do you know how can they carry on true familia in España and therefore in Puerto Rico, Cubano, or Puerto Ricano, Cubano, Dominicano, etc.? How can you carry it if you don't even know about Kiswahili? You're carrying a word, but you don't carry a culture that tells you what the word means. You know how people say words don't really have meanings because what do you attach it to? Well, you're kind of sort of right. You have to have a culture to attach a word to, or else you have no interpretation. Therefore, your construct is not based off of found or foundational doctrine, which just means anything a group of people hold up. So we have a problem, right? That we're not fighting for what we believe in because we don't believe it to be valuable, because we don't have a culture in place and laws and principles and statutes, etc., in place that we might say that this is worth fighting for. Truth is worth fighting for when your culture is true. How you doing, Romac? Truth is worth fighting for when your culture is true. Right? We were talking about this last night as well. Well, I didn't even get into this, but we were talking. I meant to bring this up, but we went so many different ways last night. So much truth was being dropped. Praise y'all for last night. It was a great session. If you get a chance, it's recorded and everything, like we record everything else. But it was great. And one of the things that I started thinking about with what's his name, Kai Sanat. I don't know if I'm even pronouncing it correctly, right? But Kai went and he had the meetup in New York, and thousands of people showed up, or whatever it was, hundreds, whatever, and they went crazy and a lot of stuff that was there, and everybody would be like, "See, our people, you can't do nothing and this and that or whatever." But did you see that there were a lot of our people that were appalled and frustrated at what they were seeing when that girl got up there and had whatever was a booty shorts, a thong, or whatever she had, and she started spreading the cheeks and stuff. And a lot of people were like, "Yo," not everybody was out there cheering. I turned it off when I started seeing her reach back for her. I said, "Oh no, I'm not trying," because there's certain things that we don't do. There's more of us than what people want to tell you who are trying to live in righteousness. How you doing, Cheryl? And I'm not slut shaming. I'm telling you, there are more of us living in righteousness. There's more of us that are appalled when somebody's showing, when a brother's walking around and his pants are sagging so that you can see his behind. Matter of fact, let me just say it the way that y'all say it. Forgive me if you think a pastor shouldn't say this, but let me just say it the way y'all say it. When a brother's walking around and he's showing his ass, I had to say it like that in front of my son to get somebody in front of us. We were at a place waiting for food. Everybody else that came in, pants up, three of us came in. Three of our diaspora came in. Every single one of them a brother, every single one of them showing their ass. One of them stopped in front of my son because he's so used to it. He doesn't even think that that's kind of wild that you would have your pants sagging, your butt's hanging, and we're sitting down and you're right in front of my son's face. So I said it out loud. I didn't want to attack. I didn't want to go into a place where I might fight in front of my son. So I had to carry it different. But I said, "Hey, bro." I said, I didn't say, "Hey, bro." I said, my son is trying to look the other way, like this is kind of wild. And I said, "Man, you know what?" I said it really loud. I was like, "Yo, you know, it's kind of wild when you sitting here and you trying to eat and people don't even realize that they got their ass in your face." Like I said it like that to let him know you're so lost right now that you think that that's cool, or you think that's what's in style, you think that's what's in play, you think that's what makes you black, right? Whatever you want to call it. And he was, he was the Dominican, but he's still us. And I had to remind him that you're doing some stuff to where like we can't even deal with stuff like you don't even realize, because this person probably homophobic. Well, I don't even use the word homophobic, but you know what they mean, right? But this person probably somebody who can't stand LGBTQ plus. by what his conversation was. Right? I don't speak Spanish that well, but I can speak enough to comprehend. And according to the conversation, I could tell they were talking bad about some of the people, even though and some of the people from, well, I won't even get into that. But long story short, right? He got the notes. He didn't pull up his pants, but he at least got his you know what out of my son's face and out of my face. But there's a lack of culture. How you doing, Cream? There's a lack of culture that's there. We don't even think about that. You know how many lesbians who swear up and down that they are not attracted to men walk around with their pants sagging and don't even realize that that comes from places like I'm forgetting the prison, like San Quentin and other places, San Quentin and other prisons and stuff like that, to where if you were in there long enough and you belonged to another man, they would have you sag your pants. How you gonna say you don't like men, but you sag your pants? You have a spirit and don't even realize what's going on. You are in cognitive dissonance. You are all over the place. Yeah, now they tight and sagging at the same place. Or like when you go to churches and you see these brothers out here who you can see the imprint of everything on them. How am I gonna get a word from you, bruh, and I can see your whole stuff? Buy some grown man pants. I'm just saying, it's not in my culture to have to look at your stuff. It's in my culture to have loose pants. Matter of fact, here's something that a lot of people don't even know. Do you know in our culture we used to never wear black pants? Did you know that? You used to never see anybody in black pants unless it was something ceremonial and it was only for a little bit of time. You know why? Because black pants, just the color black, it attracts a bunch of heat and stuff, right? But it's also messing therefore with the temperature of what's going on down there, which means sisters probably shouldn't be wearing black pants either, or black dresses or black tunics or whatever. But you could get away with the tunic because the tunic, what? It's loose and it covers certain things. But you got to ask yourself, once again, it's cultural. You're not even fighting for your culture. Who told you that you need to have tight pants? Why is it that you think that somebody's behind is attractive? That sounds like what? Butt breaking, right? A woman's shape is attractive because she bears children. But why is it attractive for you to show your behind? Literally, not figuratively. Figuratively as well. But see, if you do something spiritually or if you do something psychologically, you know it's only a matter of time before it manifests physically. So those who show their behind, right? Spiritually, those who show their behind, as far as psychologically, eventually they're going to show their behind what? Physically. Or sometimes even you're trying to fit in. So you'll start showing your behind physically. And therefore, it's only a matter of time to where the same people that make you think you're supposed to show your behind physically, you'll start showing it psychologically and you'll start showing it spiritually. Because you're 3 in 1. But don't fight. But you will not fight to keep your culture in place. How you doing, Brother Javon? Right? Fight for your culture. This is what these brothers did on the docks. They fought for their culture to the point to where they said, if you're going to take us and lock us up, but at least we're going to fight for what's right. We're going to fight for our culture. We're going to stand up for what we believe in. We know what happened in this place, and we're not going to allow somebody to try and change it or to do the same thing because they might be ignorant of it. It doesn't matter if they're ignorant of it or not. We will make sure that they know, come heaven or high water and through hell. How you doing, Michelle? We will make sure they know. How you doing? I don't know if it's Pharaoh or Pharaoh, but how you doing? Right? Like you got to realize what's going on. You're dealing with stuff that's cultural. You keep talking about that you don't believe in God, which by the way, I don't believe in God either. God is different than Elohim, if you know what God means. But nevertheless, you say you don't believe in God, but you say in God you trust. Every time you spend money. That's an oath. You know what an oath is legally, right? Y'all don't believe it because you don't think this is a spiritual thing. You don't believe in spirituality. You believe in energy, but energy and spirituality aren't the same thing. You said, well, energy is just what spiritual is. No, energy is physical. If something has energy, if it can be read, then it can't be spiritual. It can be tied through the soul into what's physical, right? But spiritual and physical are not the same. They can be parallels, but they can't be the same. Parallel lines, right? No matter how, if they intersect, if anytime a line intersects, it is by definition, it cannot be parallel. So you can't tell me a parable and say that these things automatically, they can be in line, but they can't touch. And people want to be so want to talk about making the spiritual things that they can touch. But if you can touch it, if you can obtain it easily, then it can't be a parallel. Right? But you have all these people. I'm not into spirituality, but I believe it's the energy of the thing. The energy is the physical. I'm not saying energy is not real. I'm not saying you cannot feel somebody's energy, right? I'm not saying that you don't have currents that goes through your body. I'm not saying it either. Matter of fact, you have currency as far as water that flows through your body. All those things are true, but that is not spirit. That's why you have a brain and you also have a mind. The brain is not the mind. The mind is the spirit. The brain is the physical. And you don't just think with your brain, by the way, see, because you don't even catch the physical. The physical is bigger than what you think it is, too. That's why we always have to teach people. People want to be so spiritual, but don't want to do anything physical. But your body is the temple to house the spiritual. How you going to have the spirit do the soul in a body that's not worthy of carrying the Most High? If your body is the temple, how do you carry something and your body's not even where it's supposed to be? Y'all don't want to hear that. I'm not saying just because somebody's sick, they can't house something. But what I'm saying is, how you going to keep eating 5,000 bowls of sugar a day and praying over it? See, you don't respect and value the culture. You don't respect the kingdom of heaven. You don't respect how the universe works. However you want to try to imply it or put it today. How you doing, Emma? Or Erna, excuse me, sorry. You hear what I'm saying? You're sitting up there talking about, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna have a burger that's not even real meat, with bread where they're taking out all the nutrients, with ketchup that's more sugar than tomato, if there is any tomato in it, right? With mustard that's not even real mustard anymore, right? And I'm gonna take all this stuff and I'm gonna put it in my body. But before I do so, I'm gonna pray over my temple that I'm about to put something in that's gonna hurt it. And I'm gonna ask that our Father who art in heaven to come down off his throne and be in earth and protect this earth from the negative stuff I'm about to put in it. Won't fight to make sure your body has something positive. And then talk about how you're spiritual, but you're not religious. What are you talking about? Right? Fight for your body. Fight for your temple. Hear me this rising. Fight for your temple. Kwam Yashlab. And fight for your temple. Fight for Amanava'ah, the one who's supposed to be in you, your tabernacle, the thing that's supposed to be in you. The tabernacle was not just something you carried, it was supposed to be something that was in you. That's why Yahashua is also known as a Manava'ala, what you call Emmanuel. Emmanuel literally means that which is in you. The word manual, if you buy a device today, if you go to the store, you buy a device. I know some of you don't do that on Shabbat, but I'm just saying, if you were to go to the store and buy a device, guess what would happen? It will come with a manual. The word manual means the mind of the creator. Yeah, like putting rats in your temple and then praying that no harm comes to the temple, right? The mind of the creator is supposed to be in you. You want to put stuff in you that's not even helping out with your brain, let alone your mind. And you don't just think with your brain, right? Have you ever noticed you don't just think with your brain? Sometimes you'll say, you know what, I can't wrap my head around that. You're talking about your brain. Sometimes you say, I'm not really feeling that. Sometimes you say, I might get goosebumps, right? Sometimes you say, I can't really put my hands on that concept. You might say, my heart's not in it. You might say, I have a bad gut feeling about that. You might say, I had to sit on that for a second. You might say, I'm walking in those waves, right? Your body thinks, but we don't make sure that we even think about how important the body is. Sister Judith was even saying yesterday, for those who didn't get a chance to look it up, we have it recorded. Sister Judith was she does a raw food diet class for us every Friday at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern New York time. So if you miss it, you can always look at the recording. She was making the point to talk about how you have to even realize the different stages of life of human beings so that you can actually realize the different stages of what you're eating. She was talking about sprouting things and how if you look at certain things, you shouldn't even sprout them necessarily in a huge amount of sunlight, just like a baby can't necessarily take sunlight when they're first born and all these things like that or whatever. She was making a point to discuss those things, to talk about those things, um, because and she was really speaking on those things, because if you're going to eat healthy and you're going to talk about it, you have to even realize the stages of life of what you're eating. So you have to even realize the maturity level of what's going into your body, right? If you're getting something that sprouts or whatever, just like when the sperm hits the egg and the sprout, the first sprout to come out is going to be the root, right? The root. How you doing, Sister Renee? So the root is coming out and it's catching on to things or whatever, and then you'll start to see the shoot and everything else start to shoot out. But you're sprouting and you're seeing the root come out, which means that like the root is looking to go into a specific place, looking for something specific, looking to go into dirt, right? Just like the baby is going to be in darkness in the womb. So if you're going to make sure that you look into the the sprout or whatever, you have to make sure that your sprouts are in a place to where they're getting dark, they don't have too much light, and they have able to have a chance to be able to start growing at that level. You have to treat it like it's young. You have to treat it like it's in the ground. So if you're going to eat something that's going to sprout, if it's something that's new, just like a baby needs to be in darkness in the womb, guess what happens when you sprout something, whether it's in the ground or you sprout it in your refrigerator or you put it in a napkin or you put in something that's wet, whatever, you have to put it in a place that's dark. Just like a baby would have to be in the womb, it would have to be in water, right? And then when the water breaks, the baby comes out and follows the water. Well, when it's time for the seed and everything sprouted out and now it's time for it to go, it starts to break through. See, your baby, you're supposed to have your baby actually, they put you on your back now, but you're supposed to have your baby squatting, right? In the same position as if you were using the toilet, even further down, right? And you would be on a squatting stool and your baby would come out, right? Well, your baby goes down towards you. The plant life comes up towards us. That's culture. It's worth fighting for once you know it. And once you do it a few times, you don't want to eat outside of your culture because you feel the difference inside of you. Do you not? Once you start eating inside of your culture, you feel that difference. You don't want the same thing because it feels different when you're eating fresh fruits and veggies, when you're sprouting your own stuff, right? When you get a chance, if somebody asks, should you go shopping on modern Shabbat? We would suggest that you try not to. I mean, at the end of the day, if your family, especially if you have children, if they don't have food that day and you messed up or something, I mean, take care of your babies. But we would try not to. And depends on which Shabbat too. Which Shabbat are you observing? Are you observing Shabbat based off of the Julian calendar, which means that you just keep Saturday the same 7 days no matter what, or do you do it off of the Israelite calendar to where, depending on the position of the moon, your seventh day might change? Right? But that's a whole discussion within itself. Sure, don't cook, don't do a lot of stuff or whatever. Sometimes people get to a place where it gets ridiculous, like they don't send emails and stuff like that. I mean, now we're getting to a place where we're serving the Sabbath and the Sabbath doesn't serve us. But to each their own. I'm not here to go deep into that right now, right? But it's about culture. Yeah, it's about wisdom. What does wisdom say? What does she say? Yes, wisdom is referred to as a she. That's why I say she, right? Even your soul is referred to as a she. Even in Hebrew, the Holy Spirit is referred to as a she. And people get messed up because you start thinking male or female. But see, in your culture, there's no male or female in heaven. There's no marriage being given away in heaven. If you notice, nothing in heaven is married to anything else in heaven. May I say that? I don't even know why we got on it, but it is what it is. Nothing in heaven is married to anything else in heaven. Somebody missed it. I want to say it again. Nothing in heaven is married to anything else in heaven. Things in heaven can be married to things on earth. Yahweh says, "You are my wife." Yahashua can be married to you, even though he was earthly, but he's up in heaven now. But nothing in heaven can be married to anything in heaven. And the reason I got to bring this out is because there's a lot of people now starting to teach, because they're starting to catch on to the fact that that Abba, our Father, is masculine, and Ravak Hakodash, the Holy Spirit, she is feminine, not male or female, it's masculine and feminine. And then they know that the Son was on earth, he's a male, right, married to us on earth who are coming together as a body. So technically, like, look at it as a female. And they're starting to have some weird teaching that Yahashua is my big brother, and that the Father is my father, is my daddy, and the Holy Spirit is my mother. No, where do you see that in Scripture? You will never see in scripture anywhere that the Holy Spirit is your mother with you. Not even close. But see, we won't fight for these things. But you're starting to see it. I promise you. You haven't seen it yet. Stick around a little bit. It's been coming out. People have been asking me. People have been telling me this is how I see it and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, if that's how you see it, I'm not here to come on you. I don't have a heaven and hell to put you in. I'm not coming to pound you. I'm not bound. I'm not about to beat you up and stuff like that. But I want you to hear that you better be careful, because the Father is not married to the Holy Spirit. The word Father means source. And by the way, the Father, who's masculine in the spirit, also has feminine traits if you don't like it, because the same Father who's known as our Father, who's strong, who's Aleph, who's an ox, who's able to cultivate, who spoke life into existence, right? The same Father, even though it was Father, Son, and Holy Spirit that did that, but nevertheless, the same Father who's part of that is also the same Father that it calls the breasted one. That you could breastfeed off of him. Because it's not a male, he's masculine. It's a masculine spirit. You got to be careful, right? Masculine in the spirit is different than masculine in the physical. And that's where people getting messed up in this gender thing. Do some research on that. You'll start seeing that's where people really started messing up. But the Father is a masculine spirit. The Holy Spirit is a feminine spirit. The Son is male because he was on earth. And that's why, by the way, you're going to get a glorified body. You're not going to be a spirit only. At the end of the day, when when this flesh passes, you will lose your physical. But what does it say? You're going to take off corruptible and put on what? Incorruptible. In other words, you're going to get what we call a glorified body. If I get a glorified body, the glorified body is still a physical body. It's a physical body that it can exist forever. My spirit will exist forever. My soul is tied to my spirit forever, right? But my body, glorified body, that's what I'm looking for. That's what's going to exist. Heaven and earth are going to come in together. It doesn't say he's creating a new heaven. He's creating a new heaven and a new earth. And they will come together. You got to have a glorified body to allow your spirit and your soul to reside in eternity forever. Right? Elohim is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. You are not just spirit. You are spirit, soul, and body. You see? So we lack cultural mindset on it. We lack the ability to look at things through our prism because we have no culture that we fight for that says that this must be what we come through no matter what. That's what the ancestors said. That's what Yahweh said. That's what Yahashua said. That's what Avak HaKodash said. That's what every angel said. And that's what every rabbi said. And they kept the word. That's what our culture said. That's what the Hebrew character said. Like when we have our Shabbat Shalom service for our children in a little bit, a little over an hour, or when we have that for them, guess what? They learn Hebrew characters because we were supposed to know this from the beginning. Do you know that you can't? A lot of people don't even know how to read Psalm 119. They love it. Longest book of the Bible, which is a division, not a book, but nevertheless, longest book of the Bible, longest chapter of the Bible, excuse me. Right? And longest book out of the longest book. And they love it. 176 verses. Do you know why it is 176 verses? You said our parents welcome to join as well for the children? Yeah. So the way it works, and we'll have information. You have to text me. If you try to email me, I'll probably get. Well, we're going to put our information up in a second. We got to get ready to take our leave so we can get into Shabbat service on the podcast. Anyways, but you're going to have to text us so I can make sure that I get you. Unless you're already on the email, I don't know. Since Serenity, if you're already on the email chain or not, but but text us, and we'll make sure that we get it for you. But matter of fact, if you bring in the child on there, we actually. Everybody on there has to show themselves on the screen at least for a little bit because we have to know who's on there. And we're because people use some of the stuff, like we have Shabbat school, we have French class, we have Kung Fu, and we have other things that we're looking at doing in the future. And so since people might use it for their homeschool, we have to make sure that we can see the children. So if you come on Zoom, they're going to have to be seen at least for a little bit, or else actually breaking the law. If somebody tries to trace it back to SOC and say my children learned this, if somebody feels like going through all that, they might not. But just to protect what we're doing, to protect our children, you have to make sure that you show them. But we'll be showing all this information in just a little bit. Man, I forget what I was even saying. I was trying to finish up something, and I'm not coming against you. Thank you for the question. Where was I at? I was saying there's something I got to talk about. I don't know how we got here. And then I was saying we were going to finish it up real quick. I don't remember. I don't remember. I got to get ready to take my leave, and we got to get ready to get ready for this podcast. Praise Yah. Praise Yah. Oh, Psalm 119. Thank you. A lot of people don't even know how to read Psalm 119. It's 176 verses for a particular reason. It is 176 verses for a particular reason. Those who know the culture, you know why. Why is it 176 verses? Because it has 22 characters. Somebody said that doesn't make sense. But it has 176 verses because it has 22 characters. Each Hebrew character, Aleph, Bet, Gamon, Dalet, Khe, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mim, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pe, Tesade, Kof, Reshin, Tav. I sped through that. I feel like I got everyone right. But it has 22 characters. When it has those 22 characters, right? When it has 22 characters, you have to download it. You have to be able to go on Zoom for it. And your children have to be there. We don't record it because we don't record the children. So once again, if you'd like to be a part of it, we'll have the information that pops up in a second, but I got to finish this up so we can get through. So we're going to do the shout out. We only do it on TikTok, by the way. So most of you know, if you want, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, look in the description with the video and go to Kofi_43 on TikTok. And you can catch the shout out in a little bit if you want to catch it with us. All right. If you don't know where this is, and a lot of the information is in the chat, including the number you can text. Right. So you can text the 202 number or the 410, but it's better for today in short notice if you want to text the 202 number and we'll get back to you. Okay. But so anyway, Psalm 122, if you give me a chance, I promise you I'm gonna give you all the information. Just let me finish this up real quick. So Psalm 119 has 22 Hebrew characters. Each character has 8 verses attached to it. That's why you have 176 verses. See, this is culture. What are we fighting for? Culture. Why do we need to get this? Because you're not going to see the relevance in Psalm 119 if you don't know how it works. So Psalm 119 has 176 characters, 176 verses, because there are 22 characters. There's 8 verses per character. That means 22 times 8 gets you to 176. So if I read the first 8 verses of Psalm 119, it will be under something that says Aleph. It will even say it in your Bible, Aleph. What does Aleph mean? It means the father. It means strong. It means ox. It means cultivation, right? It means not the number 1 even. So when I'm reading Psalm 119 verses 1 through 8, I need to have that as context. That's what we were supposed to be taught in our childhood. Once I got that, now I can start really having some serious conversation about Psalm 119 verses 1 through 8. If I go to Psalm 119 verses 9 through 16, what is that? That's Bet. Bet means the son who comes out the right family. If I got that down, now I can go ahead and get something out of verses 9 through 16. If I go through verses 17 through 22, that's Gamal. That means camel. It also means humility, right? I can even think about the eye of the needle. So I can read that different than I did before, and I can get what the actual interpretation is, not just the constructs without interpretation. If I read Psalm 119 verses 25 through 32. I'm reading about Dalet. Dalet is the door. When Yahashua says, I am the door, where he's making reference to certain things, you have to know in your culture what it's talking about. So even a child, when they would have heard the Most High, who was in the embodiment of Yahashua HaMashiach on earth, when they would have heard him say, I am the door, even a child would have said, oh, you are the Dalet? Oh, you're Psalm 119 verses 25 through 32. Ooh. Like, see, that would have been a different mindset. But when we hear him say, I'm the door, and sure, we get a lot of things out of it, but they would have gone, oh, their initial response would have been Psalm 119, 25 through 32, because they know what the word Dalet means. They know what the character Dalet means. They know it means a door. They know it means an entryway. They also know it means a place to enter into his rest. So you are the door. Oh, you're my place of rest. Let me pay attention real quick, what you're talking about. Now, when he finishes preaching, guess where they're going to go? They're going to look up Psalm 119, verses 25 through 32. It's a different mindset. Am I saying that Baphomet in infinity is like the Most High? No. The Most High has masculine and feminine as far as the spirit. Baphomet is when people are trying to make it okay to be half male and half female and to have birth out of that. If you look up even what people talk about as far as what's trans. Um, I don't even want to go down this road. I don't have enough time. But if you look at what people get trans from, it's because people believe that there's actually going to be a person who can carry male and female in them as one and give birth to a baby. And Ishtar is, in a sense, supposed to be that where she was a goddess, supposedly, that came from the moon and the egg. Her son, who was her husband, so her son who came out of her, who she also married, then passes away. She says he's the sun god, and then his rays impregnated her that she might give birth to Tammuz. That's more of what you're talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not the culture I'm speaking of, right? So there are some people who try to go off of that, but that's a Baphomet thing, and Baphomet is even a more modern way of looking at Ishtar, anyways, right? Anyways, sorry about that. But yeah, so you got to get that Psalm 119 down. That being said, that we're running out of time. We got to get ready for the podcast. If you want to be on the podcast, if you want to be on any of the stuff coming up that I'm about to mention, just look in the description. Or if you're on TikTok, look on TikTok in the background when the music begins to play, and you'll be able to get all the information I'm talking about in order to contact us, etc. Right now, this is real quick. I'm gonna run through this real quick, really, really quick, and then we got to go ahead and take our leave. So for today, thank you for being on the live session at the top of the hour in like 10 minutes. At 10 a.m. Eastern New York time. We got to be ready for our podcast. It'll be another one that won't be recorded because we've been letting some people talk about some personal stuff on there. But join us for the podcast if you like. At 11 a.m. Eastern New York time is when we're going to have the Shabbat school for our children. At 12:30 p.m. Eastern New York time, everybody in the Northeast region, that's Virginia, Maryland, D.C., Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Maine, I'm missing somebody, Vermont, in that area, in those areas, everything east of Ohio, everything north of North Carolina. We're going to have a meeting on Zoom, 12:30 p.m. Eastern New York time. And then at 2:00 p.m. Eastern New York time, Minister Sharon is going to lead us in a conversation, kind of grief coaching, if you will, but it's going to be a roundtable discussion, and it's just a place where you can come in on Zoom and you can come in and join in and listen and talk about your experiences and be a support system and stuff and come together as a community. We were supposed to start it last week at 2. We weren't able to start it last week, so we will start this Saturday at 2 p.m. If you don't have information on that, by the way, it's on YouTube, it's on TikTok, on all the TikTok channels, it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram. I think it's on Twitter as well, even though I don't even use Twitter like that. But it's on a whole bunch of places. And I think we even have it on our Google Calendar invite, and we send it out. So everybody should be able to have that with them. Okay. So I think that's all I have. I appreciate you all. Thank you for being on. We really, really do appreciate you. We hope that you got something from this. Thank you to everybody who's on. If you're on TikTok, we do a shout out at the end. So if you've never done a shout out with us, it will explain. It will have a lot of things that you can look into to be able to get the information of what's about to happen. So feel free to stick around and get that information. But we thank you guys. We appreciate you. We honor the king and queen in each and every one of you. Even if you're not living inside that kingdom of queendom yet, we appreciate the potential king and queen in each and every one of you. I'm not sure if it's going to be every Saturday yet. I know it's going to start today. Minister Sharon's going to be the one over it. She'll probably be able to give you more of that information and give me that information. I'm going to be following her lead on it. And we praise y'all for her doing it. So I didn't get that information yet. We're trying to at least get it started. It might be every Saturday, it might be every other Saturday. I guess it depends on her scheduling. But we thank you guys. We appreciate you. We honor you. I would guess it would be every Saturday, but I'm not sure. But we'll try to get that together for you guys and let you know, right? But at least for today, if you want to come on, we'll have that information in the chat and everything for you, and you can look it up everywhere. We thank you again. We appreciate you. We honor you. That's all that I have. We give all honor and praise to the Most High. We give all praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Maya, who lives a life that's able to be honored. You can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A-N-D, the letter N. Bloom and Flourish. She is a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. And we're thankful and grateful to everybody who supports her and endeavor to help us to be healthy. As always, it's been Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time, but being a voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. And until I have the great privilege, opportunity, and responsibility of being in front of you all again, please remember, as always, Yashta, that you are loved, you are necessary, you are majestic, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shabbat Shalom, peace, family. To those of you that are still with us right now, who are still with us on TikTok. And thank you, everybody, again, on all the other platforms. We appreciate your presence today. Those of you who are still with us on TikTok today, this is how the shout out works. This is how the shout out works. If you've never done a shout out with us,